go gray-white.
You have to get used to short.
Hi. Hi.
All right.
We are sorry, Chair.
Ready?
I'm going to start the recording.
All right. All right, we will call to order the special meeting of the City Council for June 25th, 2018. And we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. If you'd rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. And Sean, if you'll please call roll.
Commander Baggett.
Excused.
Councilmember Brown.
Here.
Councilmember DeCourcy.
Here.
Councilmember Bowman.
Excused.
Councilmember Pelosa.
Excused.
Councilmember Trout-Manuel.
Here.
Councilmember Wells.
Here.
All right, we will move on to the consent agenda. All matters listed on the consent agenda are considered by the City Council to be routine and will be enacted by one motion in the form listed. Is there a motion? Councilmember DeCourcy.
I move the approval of the consent agenda.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Trout-Manuel.
I second that.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Hearing none, all those in favor of the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Passes. All right, moving on to resolutions. Mr. City Attorney.
Thank you, Mayor. Resolution number 5375, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Auburn, Washington, authorizing the acceptance and appropriation of grant funds in the amount of $25,242 and authorizing the mayor to execute an interlocal agreement between the Washington State Department of Ecology and the City of Auburn to accept said funds for implementation of the 2017-2019 Local Solid Waste Financial Assistance Grant Program.
Thank you. Is there a motion? Councilmember Brown.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I would like to move Resolution 5375.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember DeCourcy.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you. Councilmember Brown.
Yes, so this is a relatively small grant, but an important one, and we recommend its approval.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Hearing none, all those in favor of resolution number 5375, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Passes.
Resolution 5376, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Auburn, Washington, authorizing the mayor to take steps to comply in accordance with Section 41.50.152 of the Revised Code of Washington regarding a city employee cashing out unused annual leave in excess of 240 hours.
Thank you. Do we have a motion? Councilmember DeCourcy.
I move for the adoption of Resolution 5376.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Councilmember Brown.
I second that motion.
Thank you. Councilmember DeCourcy.
Thank you, Mayor. As City Attorney said, this is in accordance with the RCWs when an employee has an excess of unpaid leave, and we have to follow through the Open Public Meetings Act, a notice for this, so the employee can cash out their unused leave.
Excellent. Are there any questions? Councilmember Wales.
How many hours, how many employees would this generally affect on an annual basis of people retiring?
Typically not too many. There would only be, it's on rare occasion, actually.
Okay. What types of employees would this cover? Because my concern is we want our employees to take advantage of their vacation time, to keep them fresh, and give them the opportunities for things that they might want to do with their family or travel or whatever. And I'm not sure if this, and does this have any impact on their retirement, the amount they get for retirement? And I need some more background.
Mayor, I can answer part of that question.
Please.
The first part of the question, Councilmember Wales, is that it applies to PERS 1 employees only that have 240, and Sean tells me that we only have one of those left at this point on that's currently working. So this should be the only employee that it affects.
Correct.
And I'll defer to Mr. Barber as to whether or not it affects his retirement pay or not.
Yeah, where do you want to? Yeah, go here.
You can come to the table, Aaron.
Okay, sounds good. So, also with this is only for employees that have vacation over 240 hours of cash out, so that's a requirement. So this is why we don't see it very frequently. We have some PERS 1 employees that have retired or separated from the city in the past, but they just haven't had that excess cash out for the vacation. And so the other thing is that we are required to bring it forward in a public meeting to say this is something that impacts their retirement. And so we're required to say that this is excess compensation over the 240, and that's why that invoice was attached with that too.
Councilmember Trout Manuel.
You said it would affect the retirement, and how would it affect?
Correct. So I believe that the purpose for this was that you can see in the invoice that we owe DRS $4,983.46 because that's the cash out in excess of the 240 hours. And I believe, I don't know the intent of the RCW, but I believe, yes, Steve, you got that?
Yes, taking a look at the statute, what it requires is that we pay into the retirement system the present value of the increase in their retirement pay for that excess contribution. And so they do get a little bit more money because they had that much, that excess. They get more retirement, and the city that the invoice Aaron is talking about is the city's payment for that sort of extra premium to pay that going forward for the benefit of the employee.
So,
Councilmember Wales.
so then they get annually a little bit more.
Yep.
So we pay this,
We pay it now, and then we're done.
so it's a
Councilmember Wales.
so it's a one-time payment. We're not
Yes.
paying this annually.
Correct.
Correct.
Okay.
And part of the thing with PERS 1 is that they take the average of your
Yeah.
two highest greatest annual salary, and so it's different than PERS 2 or PERS 3, where you would be based off your average 5 years.
Yeah.
And so that's why we're required to bring it forward at a public meeting to inform you of that.
Does anybody else have any questions? Councilmember,
Yeah, I did. So you mentioned, Mrs. Well asked how many employees. You said it's only this one. So once we take care of this one, that's it?
We believe so. The one remaining PERS 1 employee, we don't believe will cash out over 240 hours.
Councilmember Wales, did you have any
Yeah,
questions?
normally I'd have a problem with this because I think that we really need to make sure that people don't stockpile days towards the end of their retirement. And I'm not saying that's the case here, and this is only one person, so, why split hairs over something that a person has already accrued? Thank you.
Thank you. All right, are there any additional questions? Hearing none, all those in favor of resolution number 5376, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, please say no. Passes. All right, since this is a special meeting of the City Council, there are no other items on the agenda. We are adjourned, and then we will wait for a couple of minutes until Jason can get the recording going for the study session.
So how are you doing?
Doing well, thank you.
Good.
It's a great weekend.
So you're all dressed up for a meeting?
Of course, for you.
Thank you. You didn't get the memo. Oh, well, you do have blue in the, yeah, you do, okay, okay.
I was just saying, I bought a Traeger barbecue because everybody's been raving about those, They really are pretty cool. I cooked a steak last night, or 4 of them actually. It was pretty
Really
nice.
good, huh?
Yeah.
My son lives with that thing. He cooks
Yeah.
everything on, yeah, he cooks everything on
I've
that.
had people say it changed my life. Well, I can't say it would do that, but it was
Well,
pretty cool.
I don't know, he just cooks everything on that, all his dinners, and that's
Yeah,
it.
they say they make chocolate chip cookies on them, and
He hasn't done that yet, but, he's put everything in that thing, baby, it's good.
start the recording.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, this is our city council study session for June 25th, 2018. Sean, we'll call the meeting to order, so Sean, will you call the roll?
Deputy Mayor Baggett.
Excused?
Councilmember Brown.
Here.
Councilmember DeCoursey.
Here.
Councilmember Holman.
Excused?
Councilmember Pelosa.
Excused?
Councilmember Trump Manuel.
Here?
Councilmember Wells.
Here.
Are there any announcements, reports, and presentations this evening?
No, Chair.
And any no agenda items for the city council discussion, so we will move directly into item 4A, which is our Public Works and Community Development discussion items. Draft of the 2016-2017 State of Our Streets report. And we have Keith Dow and Jai Carter here. Welcome.
As soon as she gets the screen up for us. Ta-da, there we go. Okay, so tonight you have before you the draft 2016-2017 State of Our Streets report, which we wanted to go over with you and get any feedback on before we actually go forward and finalize it and make it a little bit nicer like we've done in the past years for this report. So to go through the details of it is Jai.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jai Carter. I'm the Street Systems Engineer for the City of Auburn. And I'm here to talk to you about the State of Our Streets report for 2016 and 2017. Just to give you guys a brief overview of the report, we're continuing with the newer format of the street report where we're covering both the arterial and local preservation programs in the same report. In the executive summary, the report covers the basics of the preservation programs, some of the most recent improvements to the street system, and the pavement rating survey that we did in 2017, the summer of 2017. We cover the results of that pavement data collection effort. Also, we talk about some of the next steps for the programs moving forward. In the body of the report, we get into more of the details of the accomplishments that we've had in 2016 and 2017. And we go in more in depth about the preservation programs, talking about their history, funding, planned projects, and how the projects or programs move forward in the future. Some of the maps I wanted to highlight in here. In the map section of the report, that's at the end of the report, we talk about the 2017 construction season on map 1, the 2016 construction season in map 2, and then we look at the pavement condition index for the arterial and local street programs, and basically this covers all of the detailed street ratings that we perform throughout the city on a semi-annual or every several year basis. And basically we rate every street in the system for any kind of cracking that you can see from the surface, distresses such as alligator cracking, longitudinal cracking, and things of that nature, raveling and weathering. And so we rate each section of the street and basically give each segment a scoring, and then we use that to kind of fuel our decisions on where the money is spent and how we move things forward and get the best bang for our buck with our preservation dollars. The pavement condition index score maps for the most recent years, actually for the most recent survey, are shown on maps 3 and 5, and this is basically a snapshot in time. The survey was completed in September of 2017, and so all of the more recent work that was done after September may not be fully shown on the map. Some of this stuff was updated, but not everything was updated properly yet, so we're working on that. And then on the 2017 map, I just wanted to point out the incredible amount of work that we did throughout the city. It's a lot of effort from our project management group and support staff, and I consider it to be a very highly successful year. Some of the more notable projects that were completed in 2017 were the South 277th Street Corridor Capacity and Non-Motorized Trail Improvement Project. That was where we reconstructed the roadway of 277 between Auburn Way North and L Street. Another one that we wanted to highlight was the West Main Street Multimodal Corridor and ITS Improvements Project. And we basically went from the Union Pacific Railroad trail all the way over to West Valley Highway with the street reconstruction. And so that was a very big project and much needed pavement rehabilitation there. And then finally, I wanted to talk about the B Street Northwest Reconstruction Project. B Street was the worst street in the system at that time, and so we finally nailed that one and got it off of the list. So that was a big accomplishment. That one, the other two projects were city and grant funded, and then B Street was locally funded.
What
Councilmember
was the final cost on that?
The final cost on that was, I believe, around $2.6 million, but I'll have to go back and check on that, and I'm just speaking off the cuff on that. Yeah, that was for the roadway costs, not for
Councilmember Wells?
B Street, whoever did the project for us was absolutely delightful for all the kind of businesses that were along there. They were so considerate, and they were really user-friendly and really worked hard to keep those businesses open and happy. So whoever it was, thank them. Or use
Just
them
did.
again.
It was me.
All those little businesses that we don't think about, they felt like they were really well taken care of.
So thank you.
Thank you.
I did. Someone made that comment.
Yeah.
Moving on to the next screen, the 2016 and 2017 accomplishments. I wanted to highlight a couple of things that happened in the 2016 or 2017 results for the survey of the streets condition. Basically, the local street preservation program has achieved its goal of reaching a 70 PCI score, pavement condition index score, for the average throughout the city. And so we've met that and exceeded that goal. And so that's a big accomplishment. It's been a lot of years in coming.
Councilmember Wills?
So that the one that's on page 21?
Yes.
All I
Well,
kn-
actually, it's, if you look at the top of
Yes.
the map, it's map number
5?
5, correct.
Well, when you look at that, you're blinded by green.
Yeah.
Yep.
That should tell you something for us lay people. That's really very, very incredible. Yeah.
Made a lot of progress. There's still some red, there's still some yellow. Those are the colors that we still need to do some more significant work on. Those are the rebuilds. But we have made a lot of progress
Wow.
from the first time that we saw this map 14 years ago, I think it was, when we started the program.
Yeah. Overall, we've accomplished a ton of work, and I think we're all pretty proud about how we've invested the money and approached the projects and
It's
taken
amazing.
care of the city.
Oh, Councilmember Trotman, I'm sorry.
So-
Look at the map.
If Mr. Pelosi would be here, he would say, where's number 4?
4th Street?
4th Street on here.
So that would be on map 3, because it's an arterial roadway.
And you're doing study work.
So if you look at map 3, that shows you kind of all the conditions of all the arterial and collector roadways within the city. So that's all things that are funded through the 105 Preservation Fund. The 105 Preservation Fund has typically been, on an annual basis, a little bit lower than what we've had on an annual basis for the local streets, with the exception of all the grant funds that we've been able to get for all of the federally classified roads. Not all collectors and arterials are federally classified roads, so those grants only work on some of these streets. So what you can see in this map is there's still quite a bit of red, and there's still a lot of yellow. And what to understand with the yellow is that as time goes on, those continue moving towards becoming red. So
And where
there's
is
still a lot of
Fourth
work.
Street on the map here?
So 4th Street is just north of Highway 18,
This one or this one, and they both look
and
bad.
it's a combination of colors.
Yeah, it's a multicolor street.
It's a red, yellow, some blue, but very little blue.
Councilmember Wells?
That makes it harder to repair, isn't it? Because, I mean, look at it, goes from blue to yellow to red to blue to yellow to yellow, red, yellow, and green.
Right.
So that's the combination of the scoring that it gets for that street, for each of its street segments. When we look at doing 4th Street between Auburn Way and M Street, which is the numbers that we gave you in the memo at the last study session, we're looking at what does it take for us to actually go and rebuild that street? Because we're not going to go in and do one treatment for 200 feet here and a different treatment for 500 feet here, and then we're going to look at what does it take to do the whole street, because we don't want to come back for another 20 years, right? So that's what you're going to do when you're looking at reconstruction.
So when we look at this map 3, and we see the various streets that are, in some cases, quite lengthy with the yellow, can you give everybody an indication on the 26 to 50 what that really means in pavement condition? I know if you drive it, you can say it's really alligator or ruddy or whatever. What does that really mean when you start looking at that pavement index?
Comfortable with intermittent bumps or depressions.
So,
Yeah, that's a difficult one to answer because it's more of a moderate condition street. It's not as severely rutted or severely alligator cracked or distressed as the other streets that are rated in the red. The ones that are rated in the red are pretty substantially gone, and you can tell right away when you're driving on them. They're bumpy.
What I would add to that is on that rating between 26 and 50, 50 is going to look a lot better than 26. 26 is going to start looking like you're needing to rebuild it. The 50 is going to look like, well, okay, it's not quite there yet. So, I mean, there's points in there, and that's some of what we look at when we look at selecting streets is what is the actual condition of the road, what is the treat, and that's why Jai goes out and looks at every single road that we pick to determine what is the treatment that would work best for that roadway based upon what we actually see in the field, not just the number that's in the system.
Councilmember Troutman?
So Ingrid, with all that said, when do you think we would get a report on the cost for the whole thing?
So as we
and the funding?
As we talked about last time, so we don't necessarily cost the system based upon what's the cost for the whole thing. I mean, we can run a model and give you that number, but it's beyond our ability to fund.
Yeah.
What you do have in the report a little later on is what do we think the annual cost is for us to try to reach a PCI average of 70 in the next 20 years. And that's the number that we talked about previously during all of the other ad hoc committee meetings about the car tabs and all of that. We were talking about what does it take to get to that average PCI rating of 70, which doesn't mean that every street is good. It means some are still bad, but the majority of them, like you saw on the local street map, the majority of them look good. That's kind of how we look at what do we need to fund by year. The council can choose to say, you know, we don't want to hit that target in 20 years, we want to hit it in 30 years. That's going to change what that annual cost is. If they want to hit it in 10 years, that's going to change what that annual cost is.
Councilmember Wells?
If we lower or raise the level that we think is acceptable for CPIs, that's just going to, and 4th Street continues to go downhill. We may never get around to 4th Street.
So the first step in any preservation program is you want to try to keep your streets that are in fair condition at that fair condition so that they don't fall into a reconstruction. Because if
Absolutely.
everything on this map was yellow or red, we would definitely never be able to fund all the repair of all the roads. So we're trying to keep the roads from falling to the point where they have to be rebuilt. That doesn't mean that we don't want to rebuild the other streets that do need to be rebuilt. There's some key ones on there, 15th Street Southwest in places, West Valley Highway in places. Those really need some attention. D Street Northwest we talked about last time as well. So there's a lot of roads in there that need attention. At roughly $1.5 million a year for arterial street funding, you can see with 4th Street, which was 2.4 million for the arterial street need, you're gonna take a couple of years, 2, 3 to 4 years of funding to be able to put enough money together at one time to do those streets. If we stop doing the preservation on the fair streets to hold that money to that point, those streets are gonna start degrading faster and faster. And so that's a balance of what we can do. And we did B Street by basically having a lot of really good bids come in over a couple of years, that we took the excess funds we had each of those years and we put it aside and held it for B Street. And then we took one whole year's program and held it for B Street. So that's how we did B Street. But B Street also was a PCI of 1, if I remember right.
There were segments of it that were 1, but as an aggregate, it was about a PCI of 8 prior to
So
when we got the work.
it was pretty bad, and it was getting close to the point where it was turning into gravel. 4th Street is not quite at that point yet. It is not great condition. It's definitely alligator. It definitely has issues out there. We also have a significant amount of utility work that goes along with that. So,
And of course, you mentioned also, when we look at the amount of traffic that travels on those roads, where it makes a much more significant impact related to what goes in sequence. And as I mentioned last week, we start looking at this through our ad hoc committee. It is going to become this council and other council's responsibility to take the second and third look at this and give some direction to staff about where we think some of this should go. But it's going to be, staff direction back to us, again, looking at the traffic patterns, the amount of traffic, and where we feel we really need to focus our efforts and our attention to take care of the problem overall. So it's going to be a fine balancing act here. So go ahead.
I agree with the strategy of, it's kind of cutting our nose off to spite our face if we just let everything fall apart and fix some of these other areas. But you were able, in a very shrewd way, to come up over a period of time with some funds for B Street. I am more concerned not about 4th Street. That's Bill Pelosa. I'm more concerned about 15th. But my question to you as road experts, that's where we have all the buses. And we probably have a lot of trucking and stuff. What impact do school buses and trucking have on the maintenance of a road?
In all honesty, that is the main thing that degrades the surface of a asphalt street. If you were to build a 20-year life roadway, designed for a 20-year life, if you only drove cars and like light vehicles on it, it would last forever. It would literally last forever. But what we've designed the roadways for is a certain number of truck trips, or what they call equivalent single axle loads. And so each truck has about 2 to 5 axial loads, and each one of those trucks takes a little bit of life off of the street every single time it passes. And so basically, it's the trucks and buses that cause all of the damage.
So if you were to do a rebuild or from ground up of 4th Street and 15th Street, 15th, if it had the same number of lanes as 4th Street, would still cost you more because you'd put more there because of the loads that it takes?
You have to do a little bit more investigation. You have to know what the underlying soil is and what kind of bearing capacity that has. And so if you have a really good soil underneath, then you can get away with a smaller, less deep pavement section to build an adequate structure for whatever traffic you have on there. But if you have really bad soil conditions, like we had on B Street Northwest, then you have to get into a really thick pavement section. I think we had like a 29-inch pavement section, with 18 inches of crushed rock, and then another, the rest was in asphalt. And so it's a very, very expensive thing to import and export and import that much material. And so that's why these larger streets cost so much. A local street, you typically export about a foot of the top surface, but with an arterial street, 29 inches. That says it all.
That's
so
a lot.
It's a huge amount of work.
The other thing is, as Ingrid mentioned as well, when we start, B Street were able to take excess funds off of other projects. Well, as you mentioned last week, our construction climate is now changing.
Yeah.
We're seeing higher bids coming in. We saw even tonight on the consent agenda, a bid that was over the engineer's estimate, because that's what's happening now, and that's the other issue we're going to have to face here, is looking at this related to what's happening in our current construction climate and what that means for funding overall for all the projects. So,
All right, so getting back into the presentation, a little sidetracked, but we're good, we made it back. Also, I just wanted to point out, in 2017, the city reconstructed 9.48 lane miles of roads. And like I mentioned before, that was the 277th and West Main Street projects, as well as B Street Northwest, and so, as well as the local street reconstruction project. And then we also had an additional 15.36 lane miles of streets preserved via asphalt overlay. And so we did a huge amount of work. It was highly successful in our opinion, and yeah, just wanted to highlight that. Pat on the back for everybody. And then I just wanted to get into the future program needs. We feel that the local street preservation program is adequately funded. We've reached and exceeded our goal of 70, and we are able to keep on chipping away at the streets that need to be reconstructed and continue to maintain the PCI of 70 plus. I think we're doing fine there. And then regarding the arterial and collector preservation program, we're slowly gaining ground on this, but due to the additional, due to the additional funding that we're getting from all these grants. And so that's one of those funding sources that we can't particularly count on in the future. Things become more competitive when more cities start competing for the same dollars. And so that's kind of what we're seeing in these latest grant fund calls for projects. And so I wanted to state, though, that in the future years, in the next several years, that we'll need to figure out some way to increase the budget to reach our goal of an average of 70 PCI. At the current funding levels, it doesn't accommodate for any kind of reconstruction on the arterial collector system at this time, but we're trying to do the best that we can with the funds that are available. So
I do want to add, though, that we do have grants, secured grants through 2020 for pavement preservation on our arterial network. So when he's talking about future needs, it's really looking beyond 2020. What do we need to do if the grants are getting harder and harder to get, or if the preservation program goes away at the federal level, which is a discussion pretty much every 2 years as to whether that program should continue or not, then what do we do after 2020?
Okay. On page 28, we have the appendix A. I asked in relation to PCI of 25 to 49, public chip sealing. So how often is that utilized for that pavement condition? And it says the typical life of the treatment is 3 to 10 years, but is that something we should be looking more at doing on those pavement index rating streets with that treatment?
I think that what we found over the years with chip sealing streets is that it has a time and a place to be done. And so some of our more rural streets are more fitting for these type of applications. We've had a lot of success in our arterial program, actually, over on 15th between basically the Boeing Access Drive and C Street Southwest. We did a chip seal in that area to basically put a Band-Aid on that roadway, and it's lasted for the last 14 or so years. And so that was a highly successful, but kind of a one-off type of a thing. It's something that we wouldn't normally expect to happen. So
I think 15th is a unique situation in how much traffic you have there, and that was actually a double chip seal too. So it actually added a little bit of very small amount of strength to that pavement, so I try to hold that together. So.
Right, and it keeps water out of the subgrade. It sealed the surface of the pavement, and in general, when you can do that and keep water out of the subgrade, it just keeps the material underneath from moving around and being soft under the flexible pavements.
And there are definitely downsides to chip seal, especially if you're looking in residential neighborhoods and areas with the oil and the rock and everything else. So we consider kind of all of that when we consider whether we're going to do a chip seal on a road or not.
Councilmember Trump.
So On the same topic, it's for the 3 to 10 years on the double chip seal. So when you say 3 years, why did it only last 3 years? Was there,
So that table is showing you what's the typical life that chip seal may last, that double chip seal on the road. And how long it actually works for is a factor of what are the issues with the road. So do we have a subgrade issue? So is the subgrade of the road moving so that pavement is flexing more? What is the traffic on the road? How many are trucks? How many are buses? What is that percentage mix? All of that is going to play into the life of a pavement. So when you do a treatment, that also affects the life of that treatment.
don't we know all that before you even lay it down? Because you do a study, don't you? And you have a study of traffic and,
So we do traffic counts every other year, so we have some basic information about the traffic counts. Typically, we're not necessarily going out and doing subgrade testing before doing something like a chip seal, because there's some cost associated with that. And what you'll see in our 2019-2020 budget proposals is to actually add some additional testing for being able to do some of that work for some of our more significant arterial roads. But part of what you also have to realize is that some of our arterials were built at a time when our standards were arterials or commercial streets got 3 inches of pavement and residential streets got 2. So knowing which ones have 3 inches of pavement, we don't always know for sure. And so that's part of some of the investigation we need to do, because putting a chip seal on top of something that only has 3 inches and doesn't have the structure there isn't going to help it. 15th is a little different. I think 15th actually has some structure below it. I don't think we're seeing as much of the subgrade issues there, which is why I think that double chip seal has lasted longer.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Have a nice day.
Okay, next is item 4B, King County Cities Climate Collaboration. Jeff Tate.
It's always nice to see Jeff.
Good evening. For the record, Jeff Tate, Assistant Director of Community Development Services. And first item of a few that we're going to go through this evening is the King County Cities Climate Collaboration. And because that's a mouthful, K4C is easier to say. Really the reason that staff is bringing the K4C initiative before council for study session is just to inform council that the initiative exists, a little bit of background information about what it is, and really to ask the question of council as to whether there's interest on the part of the city of Auburn joining the county and other cities within King County on the initiative, or if there's additional information, there's other staff that we could bring to a future study session to discuss further as well. So inside your packet is a short memo that I outlined. And really the memo is pointing to a few attachments that I think give a good general overview of what the K4C initiative is. So the first item there is the joint letter of commitment, which is climate change actions in King County. You'll see as part of that, that's a one-pager that just overviews the summary of the initiative. It's followed by a page of other municipalities that have signed on to that joint letter of commitment. And then the subsequent pages go through and just describe the types of things that, or the types of objectives and initiatives that K4C is looking to work with municipalities in the region. And really climate action is an issue that doesn't stop at municipal boundaries. It's an issue that is much broader than a single jurisdiction. So it's really what K4C is set up to do, is to try to get some information sharing across municipal boundaries. Everybody collects different types of data that might help understand issues a little bit better. It's a way of sharing ideas and success stories and failures about things that different municipalities engage in to try to address climate action. And there's transportation and land use and energy supply, green building. Those are types of areas that are discussed and ideas shared. And really, in the end, it's a way of trying to understand what impact actions have. So across the county, there are a lot of things that a lot of municipalities are engaged in trying to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And from facilities that we manage and own ourselves, to our fleet vehicles, to what ways to incentivize the development community to participate. So there's lots of different things that different municipalities do. There's not necessarily a one-size-fits-all. This is a way of just trying to share and work together on that initiative. I did attach the interlocal agreement that if there's interest for the city of Auburn to participate, it outlines, in more legalese what the function of K4C is, and maybe importantly too is what it doesn't do. One of the things that is spelled out is that it's not the intention of K4C to usurp a local municipality's authority. It's still up to local municipalities to take the right actions that fit for that jurisdiction, and that there's not really anything binding in terms of actions and regulations. It's just a way of promoting and sharing knowledge and working together. There's a fee associated with participation. It's $2,000 per year. And you'll see actually in the slideshow that I believe it's the slideshow. Get to the page. Oh, I'm sorry, it's the interlocal itself. It's on page 58 of 81. And you'll see that all the municipalities are listed there and what each municipality contributes financially. Auburn is listed in the category of 40 to 65,000, and the reason is because that's the portion of population that is in King County. So that's why you won't see a higher number there. So that's basically the overview. I did reach out to K4C, or to King County, and the staff lead. They're happy as well to come and talk to City Council. They welcome all participants, and again, it's a way of making sure that Council's aware of a collaborative initiative that crosses many of your colleagues may participate in this, and making sure that you're up to speed on what it is.
Jeff, I know we've already done some things. Can you give us a few examples of some of the initiatives you've already taken on in the city?
Yeah, in fact, there are, when you start looking at in the PowerPoint presentation, which is the second attachment in there that K4C did as part of an elected official summit, they list out what different municipalities are working on, the types of things. And one of the things that we've done is a greenhouse gas inventory for the city of Auburn. Now, we did that back in, I want to say, about 2010, the first one, and we just in 2017 completed an update of that, which is feeding into Auburn's own climate action plan, which will be presented to City Council in August or September. I can't remember the date, but it's a draft of a climate action plan for Auburn. So it would spell out different types of initiatives. I know that that there's already been a discussion at council on the possibility of the city purchasing electric vehicles. We've done energy audits of our own facilities, and we've implemented a whole bunch of action items at different facilities to make sure that we're taking advantage of renewable energy sources or higher efficiency buildings, things of that nature. City Council adopted the International Green Construction Code almost 3 years ago to this date. Seldom used, but that's a whole nother issue of just making the development and community aware of it as an option and incentivizing it. But that's an important first step in adopting a law that a developer could take advantage of for more efficient construction. The list is actually really long. Those are just a few examples, but the work we do in solid waste and recycling, that's important.
Councilmember Wales?
What would it look, what would our participation look like? How often are the meetings? Who would represent us? What are some of the logistics of it?
So I did ask that question of the staff at King County, and it's what they would like is a staff representative with a backup, a once-a-month meeting, and they ask that elected officials participate in 1 or 2 annual conferences or summits.
I'm kind of excited about this because it would give us a formalized knowledge source for if we ever get around to looking at solar energy and some of these other things, we would get real direct input on, truthful direct input on what works and what doesn't work. And that could be very useful to us, especially for $2,000 a year.
It's pretty inexpensive, and you know, to piggyback on that, one of the other things that I think everybody struggles with is how do you measure effect? You know, you take action to do something, and how do you measure success and outcomes, and how do you build metrics to know that anybody's even making progress over time? So it's a good way to try to align that so that people are all doing that in a similar fashion, and we really truly understand the picture better.
So Jeff, just wondering if the dollar amounts would change for us since we are over 65,000 population in King County now. We're at a little over 70,000.
Yeah, the number would go up to 2,500 then. King County may have not picked up on that. They quoted us 2,000, so they just may not be aware of the figures yet.
I would like to have, as you suggested, have someone come and talk to us more about this. It would be nice to see everything and hear everything that they like our city to be, and since we're already doing some of it, it'd be nice to get more information.
Yeah, I was going to suggest that as well, because we have 3 council members that are
Yeah.
not here.
Yeah.
And to come in with the presentation prior to us looking at the continued interest or commitment would be good for all 7 of us to be together before we do that.
Okay, we can certainly arrange that.
Councilmember Wills?
When do they have their first meeting, or are these ongoing? What's our timeline?
The timeline's purely ours,
Okay,
and there's nothing.
and they're already meeting.
Yeah,
Okay, great.
Where's this funding coming from? The $2,500 that.
$2,500?
From us, but what, it's coming from the general funds, or?
Yeah, it would come out of the environmental services budget, which is a general fund budget. There's funds there now to pay for something
Okay.
like this, so it wouldn't require additional general fund budget.
Okay.
It could be absorbed.
Well, just wanted to make sure.
Can't sell my cupcakes.
Oh,
Any questions?
no, this is great.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Now we can move on to our code enforcement presentation.
And Chris Barrick is going to join us. I'm actually going to fade away into the front row for a moment while he goes through this. But I will just say, as he's getting ready to kind of queue up, we want to make sure that on an annual basis, code enforcement is coming before City Council once or twice a year, just to talk about the kinds of things they work on, priorities, program improvements. You know, sometimes in the past we've brought some of the actual case information we'd bring forward. We thought it would be useful tonight to talk a little bit about how we've shifted the program and how we structure the program over the last couple of years. Just wanted to do that little bit of introduction. I want to turn it over to Chris, who's going to walk you through. Part of it is program, part of it is kind of a case study to show effective programs. So I'm going to step away for a few minutes while Chris takes over.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for your time tonight. Wanted to give you kind of a virtual test drive of code enforcement tonight. A little bit of what we see, how we interact with customers, and kind of the nuts and bolts of our program and things that we do. We have 3 code enforcement officers. We have primarily similar job duties, but also very differing. Myself as the lead compliance officer, we have Officer Tammy Kapuli, and our newest member is Officer George Winter. He came from us from animal control about 6 or 7 months ago. And our breakdown for George and I is about a 90-10, 90% reactive and a 10% proactive. Officer Kapuli's role is a little different. She's more on the community outreach and education proactive side, roughly an 80% and then a 20% reactive to cases that come in. I'm going to walk you through kind of the approaches we take, reactive versus proactive. We'll start on the reactive side. One thing with reactive, it's never going to go away. We get calls daily, multiple times per day. That's something that I would like to say would go away, but it never will go away. So it's something that we're always going to have a need for. Once we receive a complaint reactively, we initiate an investigation within 24 to 48 hours, meaning we go out, investigate at the property, meet with the tenant or property owner, depending on the situation, and move forward with what needs to be done. Is there a violation on the property? And then after that, we'll open up a case. Our main objective and goal in all compliance is voluntary compliance. We like to make sure that we're concise, clear with the customer, as we call them, to make sure that they know our expectations, what needs to be done, and what the end result should be, and kind of a time frame that we need that done in. Switching over to the proactive, it's quite a different animal. It's driving by something we didn't generate, or a complaint was not generated through a phone call or somebody visiting us at the counter. It's us seeing an egregious violation we know is a clear violation of the city code, taking that and moving forward with it. Without that, kind of to keep the phone calls coming in at a minimum if we can. Those are generally based on seasonal, geographic, and subject matters. So summertime, we know that on the corridors, we're going to have vegetation issues, so that's a higher priority for Officer Kapuli. She gets out and drives corridors and makes sure that the grass is cut down to the right height and things like that. With that approach, we go after more of an informational and educational process rather than straight into a formal code enforcement action. We inform the customer that they are in violation of the city code, educate them on that code, and try to gain compliance. At the end of the day, if we don't gain compliance through that, we move to a formal action and go with our traditional code enforcement. Where do we go from there? Sometimes it's not completely clear if it is a code violation. I was going to bring a couple stacks of books. I didn't have the strength to carry them over. We have 198 chapters of city code and 400 plus chapters of international code that we're responsible for enforcing. We like to think we are the subject experts in a lot of fields, but luckily for us, we have a lot of staff that are the subject experts. So sometimes when we get out on the scene, it's a matter of taking photos, taking notes, talking with the homeowner or tenant, and coming back and kind of divulging with our colleagues what we saw, what we have, and kind of look on their expertise to help move us forward. Is this a violation or is this not a violation? As you can see from the slide there, our development, storm departments, traffic departments, we talk to just about everybody here in the city to kind of help guide us along if it's not a clear violation of the city code. So now that we have all of our great information and we've determined whether there's a violation or not, we still have to do something with that. So this is kind of a virtual look of our desktop when we go into, and on your paper will only show, I think it's the last slide of it. So it'll show you what our system looks like, how we track items. So that would be our front page. This is the screen where all the information is added in, and this upper left corner, we add in all of our information such as type of violation or type of interaction, where that possible interaction or violation would be: front yard, backyard, side yard, the officer assigned to it, and then how we categorize it for tracking purposes. In the upper right corner, it has a space which shows our last action, the last time we were in the case, the disposition of the case, and there's also a tab there in case it is just an investigation, it never was a violation. That tab in the upper right corner won't be marked, so when we go to track actual violations versus interactions, we'll have that data that's available to us. Center section here is for complainant information, contact information of owner or tenant. Sometimes it's preservation companies that we have to deal with. Sometimes there's no information in there because it's a derelict property that we're trying to figure out ownership on, and once we get information, we update the center section. And then at the bottom, those are our actions. We open up all cases with either, there's about 5 or 6 different subtypes, or not subtypes, but types, whether it's investigative, actual violation, we have proactive, and a couple other ones that we will open up. We'll always have a case notes, and then also potentially at the end, which we like to see, is that case closed. Inside that section also, we'll have any notices that we've issued, notice to correct, notice of penalty, and then inside each one of those little post-it, little yellow squares next to the action, we'll open up a dialog box like this where we can input notes. Went out on June 1st, visited, talked with homeowner regarding tall grass, asked him to cut it within 3 days, whatever our notes would be. If we get phone calls in, put our complainant information in there, what their complaint was regarding it. And then how do we manage all of that? That little bit was a snippet of just a single case. This last page here is our workspace that we work in. This is an actual photo. I believe I took this at the first part of the month of mine. At that time, I had 68 open cases. I think I'm at 77 today. That's just my caseload. So we have 3 officers. At any one time, we have 200 plus cases open that we're trying to manage. So this is a nice way to go in. It can be categorized a couple different ways based off of type of violation, the date that it was opened, and it allows us to go back in and continue with our follow-up to make sure we're staying on top of our cases. That's the nuts and bolts of kind of the how we work, as far as once we have the information, what do we do with it, where do we put it, how do we store it, how do we keep up with it. Switching over to kind of what proactive looks like. When Tammy Kupuli came on about 3 years or so ago, code enforcement took a bit of a twist in the road to try to combat some things proactively rather than just reactively. We saw a great need for it, and she's done a phenomenal job. Between her and Jeff, they've come up with different subjects and areas and types of things that we want to educate the public on, proactively act on. You can see in the upper left corner, on the left side would be the corridor map, the impression corridors. Right now, that's a huge thing for especially Officer Kupuli, but the other George and myself as well, getting out there and making sure vegetation at this time of year is kept. So. On the lines of a proactive case study, I don't know if you're familiar with this property, somewhat the corner of 8th and Harvey Northeast. It was a old...
Councilmember Troutman, sorry.
Yes.
Well, I was going to wait till he's done, because I just drove by there, and I'm so happy to see that.
It looks so nice.
Oh, that it's gone.
Yeah, it's night and day.
Yeah.
And who paid for that?
The property owner. Yeah, yeah. It took some time. That's something with some of our cases. Some of them will resolve fairly quickly. If you have grass that needs to be cut, sometimes that's done the day of or next day. Some of our cases may take a year and a half. None of those cases are life safety issues, but they are things like this, buildings that need to come down, and working that process with a property owner who may have to spend $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 just to have a building removed. It's not something that they're able to pull the trigger on immediately, so.
Well, and when I looked at that and saw that it was down, I thought, you know, the city owns some property on 104th and 8th Street. And time we did the asbestos abatement, took that down, it was like $150,000. So when we ask someone who owns something, if it's that dilapidated, they probably don't have a lot of money. So you're really working with a challenging situation.
Absolutely.
To get that incredible of a job done, so.
It really is, and the asbestos is kind of a real big deal. The testing, and we've done some bids on some jobs for demos that we were looking at doing as a city, and the testing's a few $1,000s. You think, okay, a few $1,000s, not a big deal. It's if there is asbestos, the removal, they won't even quote that until they determine whether it's there or not. The last job, they said it would probably be in the $50,000 to $70,000 range for a single-family residence, and say plus the cost of demoing the building, removing all that. Yeah, you're in hundreds of thousands of dollars sometimes.
Councilmember Troutman.
And I do have to say that Tammy Capulli is right on it. I had a home on 22nd and Auburn Way, Dogwood
Love her up
Street,
there.
that it took Bill Pearson to drive by with me, and I told him that I had complained about that house, and he saw why. And he came back and talked to Tammy, and Tammy was on it that afternoon, sent him a letter, and they had it clean within 24.
That's awesome.
It was a day and a half, because I saw her and I told her, thank you for sending that letter. And they hadn't done anything. I went home that day, and they were out there cleaning it. I stopped by and I said thank you to the owner, because it's a rental.
Okay.
So the owner was out there and he was cleaning, he cut the tree. It looks.
Is that the house on the corner?
Yeah, looks wonderful.
It does, yeah.
So I thanked him for it, and he goes, no, thank whoever wrote the letter to me.
Yeah.
So, you know, I guess
It's pretty
it is
rewarding
nice
to drive through and see that we've made a difference. I mean, really, even just an aesthetic difference. Driving through and knowing you have a case on a house, and you drive by and you kind of look down to see, you don't want to bother the owner of the home to do it, but you drive by and you kind of look over your shoulder and see that they're out cutting their grass, and it's like, okay, it feels good.
But it even cleaned up the homelessness that was making a home there along their fence, and the drug dealing that was going on there is gone. So thank Tammy for doing that, because it's wonderful.
Councilmember Wells.
Tammy also did another project up there that I'd like to see more of. There was an invalid that lived up there that the plants had grown up over the top of the house, and there was a rat infestation in the back. And the guy had no money, and he wasn't capable. And she worked with some of the volunteer groups.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, if we can get more of our volunteer groups to help with some of those things, it just spreads, and it made that whole street look really nice. So
Yeah, I know how
the
you're talking about.
80% that she spends on community education and networking and stuff has a real payoff.
It really does, for especially, I mean, for the citywide, but for our department, I call her my walking Rolodex. If somebody asks me a question, I'm like, yeah, I may not know that, but I know somebody that has that in there. I mean, hey, Tammy, I need to pick your brain for a minute, so absolutely.
Really quality of life issues
Yeah.
that you're dealing with in life.
Absolutely.
So thank you very much.
So the place on Harvey, I'll give you a little history. It was built in 1951. It was last run up until 2007 as a business. There were multiple code violations over the years, ranging from junk litter, debris, overgrown vegetation, broken windows, doors, people living inside. In May of 2016, Tammy started proactively interacting with the owner by email, phone calls, written letters, to no avail. Nothing happened. In June of 16, formal enforcement action was taken. She had building official and some staff out at the building that had concerns because the roof was partially collapsed, and concerns that if people were getting inside, what might we deal with if there was a full collapse. So in 2017, December, the owner came in, applied for a demo permit, and in early 18, it is now in the state it is in. So I'll walk you through some photos here. So this is the condition of the property. I'd say this is actually probably in pretty decent condition. The grass is not 3 feet tall, and I think they've gone out and mowed. This was found inside on one of Tammy's visits with Auburn PD. Looked like somebody had a makeshift bed in there. Somebody was living in. Drug paraphernalia around the back and throughout the outside conditions. Some photos. Tammy asked for a memento from she's got a small, if anybody's seen it in her office, a small piece of the purple brick from the side that she has on her desk. So here's a part of the demo.
That's cute.
The wrapping up, cleanup, and then what it looks like now. I don't know that there's, and Jeff may have an answer what plans are. The owners initiated or talked about plans for this, but I say
nice.
at this point, it almost, I don't want to say it looks park-like, but it's almost park-like in comparison to what it was. And as you drive by, it's not an eyesore anymore. So
Yeah.
Now it's just a matter of keeping up with him cutting the grass. Kind of the then and now. I started with the department back in mid-2014, and we went out to properties, talked with homeowners, and we did track things how we currently track them. And our numbers show that really there was a lot of work that was being done, but there was really no way of tracking that information. And prior to 2017, in April, when we went out to a situation, if it was not a violation, we just went out, talked with the homeowner, determined it wasn't a violation, and moved on to the next one that was a violation. We didn't really log anything. In April of 2017, let me back up on that a little bit. So in red on your picture there, it says VIO. We had that for violation. All of our cases that were opened were a VIO. So every case opened was a violation. And one that almost, I don't want to say scars a property, but it may scar a property. If we go out and talk to somebody, I think that should be tracked, that interaction, so there's some history with that, but it necessarily isn't a red mark per se. In April 2017, we decided to take that VIO off and go without a prefix and just open up a case number, so a 17-0001 for every interaction, and go from there. And inside that case, we would embed what our interaction was. Was it an investigation? Was it actually a violation? Is it something that we proactively found? And then work the steps of our actions from there. And as you can see in the numbers, 2015, the blue is open cases, the brown is closed cases. In 2015, we had 640 open cases, 633 closed. As you go, 920 and 787 for 16. 2017, part of that is the first quarter we didn't track some of our interactions, and from the second quarter on we tracked everything. So our numbers jumped quite a bit. We went from 1163 in open cases to 1212 in closed cases. May ask why those numbers are different. Some of those cases could be from the prior years. And this year, 637 open cases and 601 closed cases, and that was through June 1st. We're on track for about 1,500 cases this year, so I'm real proud of where our department has come from where it was. We have a lot more data to help drive us in the right directions. In the 4 years that I've been here, we've made leaps and bounds as far as progress goes, and I'm real excited to see where we are in 4 more years. With that, I thank you for your time, and if there's any questions.
Councilmember Brown.
Yeah, so
There's a lot of good work obviously being done and make our city more livable, and just really appreciate that.
Thank you.
I'm sure it's not the most pleasant conversations sometimes, and I'm sure you deal with people that are frustrated, maybe don't have resources or whatever. But what can the city council do to support the work you do? What do you need from the city?
Boy, that's a great question.
I'm new, so
No,
I'll
no,
ask unusual questions perhaps.
I think the biggest thing for us is the continued support. I know that, and I know that George and Tammy feel the same, that when we're going out and we're talking with homeowners, that I knew there would be some
There's your answer.
Back up here.
Yes. The continued support, when we go out and talk with customers, we know that we have the support of mayor and council, and that speaks volumes. It looks like Jeff has.
I just wanted to say, I mean, besides elected officials, your residents report.
Sure.
We're going to talk in a second about real estate signs. I mean, that's a good example that we don't always know where everything is at, even though we're out in the community and, you know, we're driving around, and you might on your daily commute see something every day and wonder, why is something not happening? And you've really got to use the methods. The app is great. That is really the best way for a complaint to get routed to the right person quickly. Maybe your complaint is related to a car you see parked in the right-of-way. Maybe it's vegetation on private property. You know, maybe it's an animal control issue. By going that way, it gets directed out to all the right people as fast as possible. And you know, don't assume something's being taken care of. We need to know about it. Sometimes, like Chris said, there's a lot of areas of city code that code enforcement, I guess, you know, has authority to act on. But as he pointed out on the one slide, he could drive by a stormwater runoff issue and not know it's a violation. The stormwater engineer might drive by it and say, that's a violation, that shouldn't be happening. But the code enforcement officers are kind of jack of all trades, master of nothing kind of area. They know a lot. They know a little about everything. But please report. If you see graffiti, if you see something that doesn't look right, shoot it into codeenforcement@auburnwad.gov. You can use that email, you can use the app. Get it in and let us know. That's a great way of providing support. And I know occasionally council members will do this, but if your constituents are talking to you about something, get it in for investigation.
Yeah, we want to look at that. I mean, we've got people who call in and report things regularly, and they're always apologetic. And my response to them is, please don't apologize. There's 3 of us with one set of eyes each, and we rely on the community to help us do our job. Really, I can't be everywhere at all the time. And if you see it, please let us know. And if we're working on it, we'll let you know. Hey, we're already on it.
You know, I know that George came around and was looking at our neighborhood, because there's been a lot of people parking their vehicles on the grass in their front yard and everything. And he did stop and leave them just a little note. And I know that they all came to me and they go, Mrs. Trout, did you turn us in? And I go, well, you know, I just don't want you guys getting in trouble. So I go, you need to just follow the code. And no, I said, you know, I go, I don't know who turned you in, but I just don't want you getting in trouble. And the young man in front of me is constantly parking his truck right in front of his door. And I went over and I go, Mike, I go, you know, I really would hate to see you get in trouble. He go, oh, my truck, I'm working on my truck. But he only does it on the weekends.
We hear that a lot, and it's the summertime. It's a little harder to recognize. In the wintertime, it's really easy to recognize when there's 2 ruts of dirt in the middle of your lawn. Somebody's parking on the lawn, and so it's easier to see, or it's easier to deal with when we see it. But there are other ways, and we'll approach a property owner or a tenant with a complaint. We let them know we're obligated. We have the obligation to investigate, They may say, I don't know what's shocking me, or yeah, I had a really heavy load yesterday and I pulled it as close as I could. I mean, happened to be my neighbor drove by at that same time and I was parked on the grass, yes, sorry. And then we use that time to educate them, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Councilmember Wells.
So as I drive around the community, what I see and don't report, but maybe I'll get the app and start reporting and you'll grow to love me, is garbage at business sites, specifically Starbucks and Walgreens. I mean, you know, do you deal with businesses?
Every day.
Because I know my vet, he hires someone that goes out every morning and cleans up the parking lot and whatever. But some of these other businesses, there's one on 14th Street that the corner's just full of garbage. And it's my understanding that we're responsible, you know, up to the sidewalk or to the, you know, and there's all this garbage. So we can report that.
Absolutely, please do,
What,
yeah.
what about dead plants? A hedge of 5-year-old dead plants. Now, they're not a safety because they're only 5 feet tall, but do you do anything about dead vegetation?
We can, yes,
Okay.
yeah,
And my
because they are a fire hazard.
And the other one, cars on lawns. Now, I can see where a person pulls it up, kind of, I wouldn't do it in my house, but pulls it up on their lawn and washes their car because, you know, the water, you know, whatever. But up where I live, on Lee Hill, there'll be people with 5 cars parked on their grass every day. Or they park in the bushes with a huge truck full of lumber and the house looks like it's gonna fall down and everything else. So we just go on our app.
On the app, if you can, if you're driving by, the app allows you to take a photo. You can take a photo and send it in, and we'll look into it, absolutely.
Okay. Do you do ride-alongs?
Absolutely. Anytime you want to come along, you let us know.
Oh, that would be interesting.
You have to buy lunch, though.
Oh, I can do that. I can make a lunch and you'll never ask me to do it again. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
But you guys, you're wonderful.
You too.
And you're a
Thank you.
good team. You've got your roles all balanced and I like the education portion of it.
Yeah, I'm real proud of the team that we have. It's a really cohesive group. We all bring different talents in, and we work well off each other. And we have a great supervisor that we can cry on his shoulder occasionally.
Just saying.
I did, Chris, I do want to ask about the status of our graffiti and tagging. I see on occasion, there's buildings that have pretty significant markings on them and such, so where are we currently? We got a presentation of maybe a year and a half or so ago on this, so.
We're still dealing with it. It's an ongoing fight, for lack of better words. We're diligent about dealing with property owners, about getting it covered up. We also partner up with Green River Community College as one of our volunteers, and they go out on a monthly basis, and throughout the month we find areas that are largely hit, and so the Green River Community College group will go out on a Saturday. Auburn Police Department sends an officer out to make sure that everybody's safe, especially if they're covering up gang graffiti, and they go on kind of a graffiti covering spree, and they cover as much as they can in 3 or 4 hours on a Saturday every month, and then the 3 of us are still diligently working with homeowners and property owners to get it covered as quickly as they possibly can. We also have our paint program that we offer. Yeah.
Excellent.
The addition of the partnership with Green River College has been really great. You know, they continue to be committed to participating in some solutions that the community struggles with. Graffiti is just, you know, it's hard because overnight you could just, you know, a person can just blitz an entire area. So that's a never-ending battle. And to have a core of volunteers like the college kids who are interested in going out and cleaning up, you know, a lot of times we can't wait a month. If they just did a project this past weekend, we're not going to wait a month, but we always have projects lined up for them as soon as they're, you know, say that they're ready to go out on a Saturday. It's been helpful.
We have some graffiti under the Highway 18 overpass on Auburn Way South, and that doesn't belong to us. Those concrete buttresses there belong to the state. Can we still cover that up, or do we have to wait for the state to come up with a roads plan in 10 years, their tip, whatever, to cover up graffiti?
It's a combination of both. Sometimes if it's in their time of year to do that, they're pretty responsive to it. Underneath, I don't even know if I want to talk about it because I'm going to jinx it. On the an urban trail underneath Highway 18 was horrible, and knock on wood, for the last few months it's not been a problem, and they've gone out and covered it every time. So
We have,
Well, go ahead.
yeah, we have service groups that adopt a street. We ought to think about having service groups that adopt a graffiti area. Because I know my Kiwanis group, we go out and clean some street, and we're always looking for community service things, especially if it only takes a roller and you provide the paint.
absolutely.
But that would be something for us to adopt, especially a real problem area. I think it's wonderful that you're doing something up there on Lee Hill with Green River, because there's a lot of places up there on some of those rickety fences for people to put things. If you've got the kids involved, there's some real ownership, and they've got great sets of eyes. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thanks for asking that question. That's the same question, because it's really unsightly at times there, so, yeah.
I'm going to send all of mine in tomorrow if I get the app.
Be perfect. I'm on vacation tomorrow. So
Well, we're going to give you extended time and extra pay.
I'm good with that.
Any other questions? Thank you, Chris.
You bet. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
And Jeff, as you segue in, we can now move into our temporary signs presentation.
Thank you again, Jeff Tate, Assistant Director of Community Development. So the memorandum that I've provided in your packet is an overview of temporary signs. I believe that Councilmember Wales was one who asked specifically that we bring before, just as a discussion item, signs, and I think real estate signs in particular. But I thought I'd just overview the three different types of temporary signs that we have outlined in code. I thought there's two different categories, and then there's exempt signs. So the first section of the memorandum describes what kinds of signs in the city of Auburn are exempt from our city codes. And I grouped that in here because you'll see those signs out in the community, and thought it would be good to have a solid understanding of the types of things that we don't regulate. Some of these we don't regulate by choice, probably. Some we don't regulate because of constitutional issues or other conflicts with state or federal law. So that list is just taken verbatim from city code under that first bullet point. The second bullet point walks through temporary signs, which are signs like banners and grand opening signs and things of that nature. So there's some restrictions that are outlined under that second bullet that overview those types of signs, and some of the provisions and time limitations that are associated with temporary signs like that. And then the third bullet point hits the real estate signs. It's really a separate section of city code. It's got its own section, real estate signs. And as you go through items 1 through 6, you'll see that there's some standards, and they apply to different types of signs that range from the individual homeowner who has a for sale sign on their property to the open house signs. And then items 4 and 5, it can kind of get lost in the wordiness of things at times, but those 4 and 5 really deals with undeveloped or developing pieces of property. Item number 4 is for commercial industrial undeveloped properties, and then for item 5, it's undeveloped residential lands, which we've applied that standard to residential lands that are about to be developed, where they're subdivided and a home builder starts wanting to build a community there. There is a provision under item 6 that allows for additional signs under department director approval. This is not something that we have a lot of experience applying. We don't typically receive the request, and we're not real proactive on item 6 to go out and ask property owners or those who are brokers or whoever, if they want to put more signs up in the city. So we don't really pursue that, but if someone requested it, we could consider it. And that whole bullet point right there with the items 1 through 6 applies to private property. I've included a last bullet point of really how things look in the public right-of-way, and really just a caption of what our history has been in terms of what we have and haven't allowed within the public right-of-way with respect to real estate signs. That's not in the code. That's not how, the signage code does not regulate signage in the public right-of-way. So those are more policy choices that the city makes in terms of how we allow the right-of-way to be used or not used, and the ability to control location and other factors if someone is to make the request. I will indicate that there are some restrictions on the number of signs, there are restrictions on the size of signs, the height of signs, and then when you get into the public right-of-way, there are other restrictions and requirements that we impose upon property owners as well. This is a good example of something to report if you see something that you don't think looks right or you don't like, that we can certainly investigate. And knowing that we were going to have this conversation, we did do a little bit of emphasis out there just to kind of get a sense, sending code enforcement out just to look for some of these in some of the spots where they've popped up in years past. So we have already engaged a few of the home builders where we found some violations of city code, because sometimes they just go put a sign up and they don't ask us or tell us, and it's just there, and we notice it, but we don't necessarily know how long it's been there by the time we notice it. So,
Councilmember Brown.
Yeah, I'm curious, with respect to signs on commercial property, does that, is there an evaluation of the appropriateness according to code in terms of the qualitative aspect of the sign when it goes through the city for permitting? Does that happen?
Yeah. So when a commercial sign is proposed, you literally apply for a sign permit. That's what it's called. And we review sign permits for a few different things. One is, we want to make sure that the location is appropriate and it's not blocking, sight distance at an intersection. We want to look at its structural integrity. So all types of signs have foundations and electrical connections, and we look at that kind of stuff. And then we have standards in our city code that dictate, and it changes from zone to zone, but it establishes the height limit, the types of signs, whether it's a pole sign or a monument sign or a wall sign that goes on a building. So we have different standards for different types of signs that also govern the size. Where we can't really go is content. And we can't regulate one type of, we can't, a real easy example, we can't tell a church that they can have this type of sign, this size of sign, and we can't tell a business owner and treat them differently. So while those are two different types of customers and two different populations, if we start regulating them differently, that means we are starting to factor in the content of the sign.
Yeah.
So we have to be very careful. There's a Supreme Court case of Gilbert, city of Gilbert in Arizona, that lots of information came out of that case. Some of it is challenging, but it very much reaffirms local municipalities' constraints in terms of what it regulates with signage. Steve's back there either wanting to add something or supporting that.
I'm having flashbacks to the Reed v. Gilbert case.
Oh,
Supreme Court case about 4 or 5 years ago. It has been modified slightly by some lower Ninth Circuit Court decisions, talking about some allowable restrictions on commercial speech. But Jeff is basically right. If you allow a 4x6 sign for this type of person, you have to allow a 4x6 sign for everybody.
But we do look at all those standards, and every sign unless it's listed as an exempt sign, goes through that process, or is supposed to go through that process before, and then they'll get a permit.
Councilmember Trump Manuel, then Councilmember Wales.
Well, you answered my question. I was going to ask, because you have on here different categories up on top of the 78, where you says permits are not required for these types of signs. So I was going to ask, what signs are the ones that need a permit? And you pretty much answered it. So, thank you.
Okay, back a number of years ago when the real estate market was flush with things for sale, and we were really working to help support the real estate and building industry, we allowed some leeway on signage. And later on also, to promote some local small businesses, we allowed the sandwich boards to come back. And I was pleased, Mayor Backus, that you and I had that one gentleman that came and talked to us about signs and didn't have anything bad to say about you and I and our plethora of campaign signs. But in the process of cleaning them up and putting them up and putting them up again and cleaning them up, I got really tired of Main View's sticks. Now, they put all their signs up on the weekend because apparently we don't have any safety issues on the weekend. And they hire somebody that starts on Friday, so maybe that is Friday, and then he takes them down. The gentleman I saw was a guy, takes them then down on Monday, and they leave the sticks. And many or some of the locations are promoting things that aren't even in the city of Auburn. And I think that we need to deal with, are we going to let them, especially up on Lee Hill? I don't know if that's an issue anywhere else, but it's a big issue up on Lee Hill. And the circle is on 304th and 124th is just covered with lumber. If anyone wants to run a campaign and pick up extra sign posts, that's the place. And we also have some huge real estate signs up there for developments that are in Kent and Black Diamond. And the one gentleman said, you know, what's the deal with all the signs? So I think that it's time for us to maybe as a council look at, okay, the issue of wanting to help the builders. I mean, it's a market that's moving really, really pretty fast. Now, they've got some up there at Main View, and they're beautiful. I mean, they're permanently installed, and they're, you know, and I want to promote business, but I don't like the laughing and the signs all over the place that come and go and that. The other issue, and this will, our attorney can help us with this, is we also lightened up on the sandwich boards. And sandwich boards for massage parlors on Main Street that are handwritten. Okay, I know I'm kind of a neatnik, but can we have standards about them being professionally prepared so they don't look so transitory? And so that's why I wanted these issues, because you can see that I'm really concerned about code enforcement. And part of code enforcement is signs, and part of it is litter, and you saw my issues as it related to garbage pickup and wanting to have some ways to deal with some of that other. I'm a neatnik, and so that's why I wanted this item on here.
I will tell you too that, like with Sandwich Board, there are communities that have, for lack of a better term, have developed some design standards for sandwich boards. that help with just appearance, you know, and trying to promote creativity and artistic looking signs. And, oh, go ahead.
Well, you know, we use them. We use them for special events. I mean, we use them for the art walk. We use them for a lot of things. And they look really nice, and they're fun, and they're supposed to be a way to catch people's interest and whatever. But I would like to see us look at some design standards then for the sandwich boards. Now, is it true that we are not supposed to have commercial real estate signs for other developments outside of Auburn, in Auburn?
So we made an administrative choice in the rights of way
Okay.
to only allow real estate signs that advertise Auburn communities. So, so you have to ask and answer that question on private property different than rights of way. So you won't see that spelled out in city code. It is an administrative requirement. So the signs that advertise the bridges and the signs that advertise Talela are signs that we have already informed those builders, because they are in the right of way, to remove them. But if someone wanted to put that sign, move it 4 feet over onto the private property, that becomes a different scenario. So I don't want to leave the impression that you would never see in Auburn a sign that advertises something outside of Auburn.
But is the administrative thing enforceable?
Yeah, it's our right of way.
Okay, then I'll start sending you pictures.
Yeah, and again, that's appreciated to know where they're at. We know of a couple clusters where they're at, 312th, 132nd, that intersection, and then a kitty corner to the VRFA, the old VRFA fire station. You know, so we know where a few of them
Okay, well,
typically
that's
pop
where
up.
those are the ones I see.
I have a
So-
question then,
okay.
Councilman Trump.
Go ahead.
So, Jeff, in looking at a subdivision that is sold out, and they have their sign that says sold out, is there any regulation on how long that sign can stay in place? Because some of them seem to be there for a year or more where the subdivision's been sold out.
Again, in the right of way,
Yeah.
we can put stipulations on the use of city right of way. So that hasn't been one that's come up. But that's one that we can certainly take on and add to the administrative procedures. On private property,
Excuse me.
I'm not sure, because it's a content item. But with private property, we do have some other angles. I don't want to make it sound like people with private property scenarios that they can do whatever they want. There are limitations that relate back to the community itself on where signs can be located. So if an advertised community is here in this part of the city, we have some angles and some control about where all those signs, I mean, they're allowed a little bit on their own property, but then where other signs are placed, we have ways to ratchet down, limit the number of signs that are extended throughout the city. So it'd still be important, if you saw that, to report it. And maybe we can't do something here and there, but I bet most of the time there is something that we could do about it.
Councilman Trump. anyone?
Okay, again, you answered one of the questions I want about the private, property. Is there a limit that we can, if it's in our city and private property are allowing these businesses to put their signs on their property, is there a limit that we can allow them? Or do we go talk to the owner of that property? Or is there any codes to address
A limit on
that?
the number of so for example, the property that is kitty corner to the VRFA fire station, it periodically will have 3 or 4 on the property, different communities. Is that the question you're asking? How many can be on one property?
Well, and also, since it's in our city zone, and it's, and they're going to the property owner to be able to put that, is there a limit at how long they can have that there? Or is that totally
There-
up to the owner?
It's not. There are limitations, and there is a clock. There are limits on numbers. I mean, those are things that we can respond to and then look at a property, and it might come down to making different decisions for each of the signs depending upon how long they've been there. Typically, the community that's being advertised, the way code spells out is that it should run for 3 years, because it usually takes a few years for a community to build out.
Yeah.
But if something's sold out and that sign's been there for 7 years, those are things that we can react to.
Councilmember Wells?
So I have two questions. Is it appropriate for people to, realtors to put them on the circles and put them along the right-of-way Friday, Saturday, and Sundays?
There should be nothing in the circles.
Okay.
And it's long been the policy that there should be no A-boards or stick signs in any of the islands or medians.
Okay, what
So when you
about-
get to 277th and Auburn Way North and 277th, there's a little triangle there.
Yeah.
If you're trying to turn right and go east off of Auburn Way North, you'll see signs pop up there. And then they're removed.
Yeah.
So in any of those areas, because it's considered part of the transportation system and there's site visibility concerns, those are areas where we routinely tell builders to not put signs. And it's frustrating because now they're the builder's signs, so they should own that issue, but the builders actually don't really argue with that. But when they hire someone who's in a pickup truck
Yeah.
that goes out at 11 o'clock at night, they just litter them everywhere, and those people aren't informed.
They aren't told the rules, yeah, yeah.
Good.
Well, I would be interested in knowing if the few of us that are here, if we would be interested in having Jeff over the next year or two, or whenever, if it meets with Nancy's approval, that we work on some sandwich board guidelines or rules so that we have some uniform quality.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. I think, in some cases, some people can do a very nice hand-painted sign, but in most cases, they can't. And to have more uniformity and kind of a better presentation, I think it's something we should take a look at.
If nothing else, it's not difficult for staff to pull together examples of what some other communities have done, and we can share that as a starting point.
Any other questions? Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any other discussion items?
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
New business? On to the matrix. So first, on the matrix, as you'll notice under the red, we have the item number 2, which is being removed for now, so that is a item that's coming off at this particular time. And we just had our sign requirements tonight, so that's coming off on that one. So under municipal services, we have a TDB on park rules and on consolidated court fees, which we talked about.
You talked
Yeah.
about, yeah.
So on the park rules, anything on that one?
No, and Daryl was not
Okay,
here
so
today.
that's still TBD. And then, the only items we have are still the TBDs on items 12 and 13, cost of service study and annexations. We have to change Attorney Hyde, don't we?
Yes.
And then on number 6, we've got Chief Pearson doing that, and also
Okay.
I wanted to add Dave Martin from DV Task Force
Okay.
To that presentation?
to be with that, yeah, because that's what they're out there, their promotion on the firearms.
Go ahead, Larry.
Just a question on the number 6 there. is that more appropriate under Councilmember Trout-Manuel's purview there, or, 'cause I notice it's under the municipal services.
Which is where police resides.
Normally, yeah. But it's also an aspect to health and human services there as well, so just curious. Okay.
Oh, that is under yours, isn't it?
Yeah.
Does it matter?
It doesn't
it doesn't matter.
I mean, it doesn't
No.
matter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Trying to figure the lay of the land here.
I don't know.
There's something that I should be doing on that, or you're taking care of.
It's, yeah,
Getting
it'll,
that scheduled.
the present, well, it's on here, and Chief Pearson is aware and has the presentation available,
Okay.
ready to go.
All right. And since it's July 9th, we probably should go ahead and do that at that time frame anyhow, so it's in line with that presentation on municipal services. So we see.
Sorry, can I ask a clarifying question? Dave Martin is going to present with
Well,
Chief Pearson.
well, that's this, I just went to a DV conference on Wednesday, an all-day conference, and Dave Martin and Chris, I was gonna get his last name, they do a presentation on the firearms. There's that program where they turn the firearms in.
Yeah.
And they did such a wonderful job that I would like them to come to our city, our study session and do that. But I see that
Is he from King County?
he's King County
Prosecutor.
prosecutor, yeah. So, but that would be on his time, so let me talk to him and see if he would be willing to do it on that date. Okay.
Okay. And I think you can just coordinate with Councilmember Brown on that.
Brown,
So
yeah,
if
okay.
we're going to do it on July 9th, that falls under the municipal services
Mhm.
focus area presentation.
If not, then I would have him do it at public health, human health.
Anything else to add to the matrix? Okay, we are adjourned.